Gary, you want to introduce?
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Yes, it's my privilege and honor to have a wonderful person I've known many years, and we've been in and out of each other's lives in different ways. But I'm always in remembrance and now appreciation of being reconnected with Lamel. So let me do a brief bio. If I had to do the whole bio, it could take a couple of days, but we haven't got a couple of days, so let's just shorten it. Lamel McMorris is the CEO of the Washington, D.C. of Phase 2 consulting firm dedicated to serving his clients to navigate their enterprises into greater good. Always a good thing. He serves many of the nation's leading decision makers in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors, and his organization is based in Washington, D.C., as I said. He's the founder and managing principal of Greenlining Realty USA, a comprehensive urban development firm launched recently in Lamel's childhood neighborhood in West Woodlawn, which I'm sure we'll talk about, to create affordable housing and vibrant commercial corridors and redevelopment. What a wonderful idea. He is a lifelong advocate of civil, economic, and social rights, and serves as a volunteer also for youth and mentoring organizations. He was part of the Redeem the Dream March on Washington, D.C. He served as the national coordinator in 2000. He attended Princeton Theological Seminary and received a Master of Divinity and Bachelor's at Morehouse College. He has an honorary doctorate from St. Augustine University. And finally, Lamel is recognized for his entrepreneurial spirit, high-impact approach to effective advocacy. We're going to talk about what that advocacy is. So welcome, Lamel. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Gary.
You're welcome, my friend, we put together some questions that we can go off of and also go off in other areas, but we're going to start with something, and then we can just see how the Spirit moves all of us. And anyone can interact with Lamel, and of course, when we have the recording also, there's going to be a lot of people that will want to put questions out there too. So as I said, I first met Lamel as the president. He was the president of the Chicago Public Schools' first local school council student reps in 1998. I think it was Lamel, whatever, I forget it was.
89, 90, 91.
I mix it up, okay? the local school reform is happening, and they had local school councils in over 500 or 600 high schools. And they had a student representative for each of the local school councils, but none of them had a voice or a vote, okay, which upset a lot of the students. So I was able to work with them, thank God, and work with them, and that's where I first met Lamel, and I saw his leadership ability right there, and he's continued it through the years. He's gone on to demonstrate these abilities, as we'll talk about. So Lamel, first question. How has your faith and journey as a child and your current advocacy work been impacted by racial, economic, and social justice? Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me. This is quite an honor, and I consider it a full circle moment. Linda, you can tell a tree by the fruit it bears. And in my work today, as a matter of fact, working with a major energy company, we were talking about mission, purpose, and vision. And it reminded me that the first person to train me and sit me down and talk about mission and purpose and vision and to really wrestle with that was Gary Goldman over 30 years ago as a student at Whitney Young Magnet High School. And so, you know, you can draw a line from my childhood to everything, Gary, that I'm doing today. It may not necessarily be a straight line, but there is a line. And I am a part of the fruit of the tree that you sprouted. And so I hope that you take great comfort in that and pride in that, but also recognize that as you toil and wrestle with young people, we may pretend like we're not listening and we don't hear you, but we do. And hopefully I'm evidence of that 30 years later as we sit here tonight. Clearly, you know, if we look at you know, if I were to look at my journey, especially through a faith lens, in the Christian church, you know, we would call it ordered steps. You know, I fully recognize that I'm just not that smart, no matter what school I went to or how many degrees I may have. There's no way that my life could unfold the way it has from meeting Gary 30 years today to everything, to 30 years ago to everything I'm doing today, if I didn't recognize and acknowledge that there has to be a much greater power and force. How did I meet and why did I meet Gary Goldman? How and why did the things happen to me as a student leader, and how I ended up even at Morehouse College, how I ended up from Morehouse College to Princeton Seminary, and how I ended up from seminary to working back home in Chicago Urban League, and then with various civil rights and social justice leaders, and then in DC. There's no way that any of us, you know, we could put together strategies and business plans. And, you know, I always tell folks, you know, they're the things in life that we can quantify, that we can measure, that we can put on graphs and charts and use in statistics. But then they're the intangibles, the things that you cannot put on a whiteboard, the things that you cannot put in a chart. And I mentioned to you and Linda previously, when I look back at my childhood, there was this song that one of my favorite groups, Take Six, would sing. And I don't think I really understood the words, you know, as I was, you know, singing this song and loving it, you know, when I was a kid. But as I got older, I began to understand as I reflected on my childhood. And the words simply, one, it's a very, you know, famous song in church. And the words simply go, something within me I can't explain. All I know is that I thank God for whatever it is that something is that has been within me. And if I were to reflect back on my childhood and the hours, Gary, that we spent in trainings where I could have been doing God knows what in the streets on the south side of Chicago, but yet I was in flip charts with you, working on vision and mission statements and working on a student organization. And you know, as a kid, always being focused on current events and knowing what was going on. As you can see, Harold Washington was a major influence. I keep him very close to my heart, and he was being the first Black mayor of Chicago. So it was always that imagining beyond my circumstance and whatever it was in the West Woodlawn neighborhood where I grew up at 66 of Cottage Grove, not necessarily getting wrapped into the things of my environment. But as a kid, I was imagining myself doing everything I'm doing today. I just didn't know exactly how it was going to manifest itself. And so we come up with all of these wonderful legislative strategies and things that we have to imbue and impart on young people. But some of the stuff is really not that complicated. As I look at my childhood, mine was simply one of imagining myself beyond whatever my circumstance was presently. And that imagination and that vision of creating who I was going to be and where I was going to go and how I was going to navigate my way around Washington, D.C. And at one point, I thought I was going to be the mayor of Chicago, and probably may have even told some of my friends that I was going to be the president of the United States. But imagining myself, whatever that was beyond my present, guided me. And it was not necessarily a straight line, but Gary, there's a line from everything that we started from my childhood to what I'm doing tonight.
You know, Lamel, it's music to my heart, my ears and my heart, because you've grown to be the man I always saw your heart and your passion working with all these other young people too. So it gives me great pleasure, great joy, and I think everybody here too also are involved with education in their own way, to know that we're all linked together here, and that there's an inner power, there's an inner spirit within all of us, say it as you will.
Yes.
If we work with that spirit and open up to it, that greater spirit, we all have a purpose here. And that purpose is all aligned as we work together in one accord. As we work in one accord, that magnifies everything we're doing. When two or three are gathered, right? So Lamel, I'm very pleased what you're saying. You've come to the core where a lot of people are still working with that. They work from the outside in, you're working from the inside out. It's called the intention, your heart's intention You let it guide you to where you need to be going. And you don't have to worry about how, because that'll show up as you move ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Lamel.
Right. And I'm very, very touched. I love to see that relationship between you and Gary, because I've known Gary has such a big heart, and to see somebody that was part of his life that can really testify to his wonderful teachings and how he relates to the children. You know, he's one of the children. He's actually still a child, but so it's wonderful to see. And his protege. I mean, a person like yourself that has been through so much in the community. I'd like to ask you a question about what do
Sure.
you see what's happening now in the community, you know, with Black Lives Matter. How is that touching your life, and how are you seeing us as a country move forward from that?
Yeah, I'm deeply affected by what is happening in so many respects. One, as a Black male in America, um, so much of my life has been centered in irony. Um, so much of my community's life has been centered in irony. And in one hand, emerging to a place where you were not considered human on one hand, uh, and without rights on one hand, but yet your labor was valued, right? As we manifest and go forward as a Black male in America, on one hand, to yell and scream that my life matters and that I'm valued. And as W.E.B. Du Bois called it, the double consciousness of the Negro. As Gary talked about, office in Washington, D.C., navigate in and around corporate corridors, et cetera. But I always have to be able to go back to the corners in the neighborhood of 66 and Cottage Grove. The irony and the duplicity and the double consciousness. I may walk into my office building donned in a suit, headed to my office, but yet be in an elevator with someone who sees me as a threat. Clutch purse, clutch. I may get off of this call with you tonight and take off this sports coat and don a mask to go outside and eat, and possibly even a hoodie. And so on one hand, I can be with you and all of everyone around the country tonight and seen as someone who's worthy enough to be here, but yet step out of my own home and be deemed a threat. So I am deeply moved, but deeply moved to act, deeply moved to see this moment as an opportunity, deeply moved to see this moment as a way to forge real change that eradicates systemic racism, a way to move from emotional responses to real actionable and achievable and measurable responses. I take great pride in the companies that I've been able to work with during this season and during this time of racial injustice and inequity, and trying to put forth strategies in place so that this is not a one-time moment of emotional giving, but that we can sustain everything that we've started. So I'm deeply moved, deeply connected to what's going on, to proclaim to my neighbors in my neighborhood in West Woodlawn that our lives indeed matter. That even during this unrest and even during this, we have not stopped trying to, transform the neighborhood and build new homes on vacant lots and rehab blighted properties and put brothers on the corner into apprenticeships and jobs and training. And so this moment, Linda, is heavy on all of us. But I approach it with a spirit of hope, with a spirit of opportunity, with a renewed commitment to the work as someone who's been working in civil rights and social justice and with civil rights and social justice organizations. And I'm committed to ensure as best I can that the young people that Gary has been working with and the young people that we continue to work with around this country will not have to live in a state of irony as Black and brown children going forward.
Right. Well, I thank you for that. I think that there's, as Gary and I talk about being one from a place of unity and God consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
none of this exists in that present state of consciousness and awareness and the place of godliness. That's our desire, I know, is to wake up people from that belief that they are separate and apart.
Mm-hmm.
They're separate and apart. We're all one. And we are living in the illusion that we're separate because we have this egoic mind that says, you're black, I'm white, I'm rich, you're poor, I'm educated, you're not. This is the ego state of it's really craziness. We're believing our identity to be who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And if we would understand it's not who we are, our identity, we can say our name, our roles, our nationality, our religion, but that's all separation. That's the identity that we have as humans going on this planet and trying to create things as we go in a very limited capacity. But when we realize we're not that, we're beings connected to the one of God. And then there's peace, there's unity, there's no separation. So can
Correct.
you talk a little bit about that? Do you also believe in those types of in that kind of awakened conscious state as our authentic self, as our true self?
Yeah, Dr. King, and I move and dwell very much so. I like to think, at least as best I can, in the Kingian tradition of nonviolence and peace. Right, recognizing that the voice, if you will, of the unheard and the depressed and the downtrodden during moments, as we've seen, will ultimately rise up and demand, not just ask, but demand to be heard, especially when you watch someone on the ground proclaiming that they can't breathe for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. You continue to see people that look like you proclaim for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and beyond that they can't breathe. So yes, we dwell in this peaceful state and through nonviolent direct engagement and action. But we also recognize injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we work to continue to eradicate injustices. And that's why people all over the world have been proclaiming that Black Lives Matter. That's not a proclamation to say that all lives don't matter, but it's to proclaim, in light of recent events and in light of historic and systemic racism, that Black lives actually matter. And it's nothing wrong with saying that Black lives matter. And it doesn't mean that Asian lives don't matter. It doesn't mean that Latin lives don't matter. It doesn't mean that white lives don't matter. This is a proclamation and an affirmation, to your point, Linda, that if your life matters, then my life, it's an automatic acknowledgement that my life should matter as well, because we are one.
That's right. Absolutely.
Very well said, Lamel.
Thank you.
Lamel, there's so many avenues we can go down, so we'll just keep moving with the spirit. And of course, if other people have some thoughts and questions, of course, we all have us on the show here, a common love for young people. We've said that. And I've written this book, and Linda has a book also. This is called Empowering Students to Transform Schools. It's really schools, communities, and the world. And we're all about, I think, empowering young people and all of us to be the best we can be. But I wanted to go on this track for a few minutes and then talk about what's going on in Woodlawn. Over the years, as I know, I've worked with a lot of inner city young people, and I wanted to read something where this was done in Englewood, Robeson High School, that you may know about.
Sure.
And they closed that down, by the way, with Harper. And they gave me 50 of the worst, they said worst at-risk students. I never said worst, they did. I said at risk, we're all at risk, to create a vision for the school. And we worked 4 hours. But there was one student who wouldn't work with us. He would just had his head down like this and wanted me to throw him out. I didn't do that. I put my hand on his shoulder and I kept tapping him. I walked around and he's going, "Who's this white dude?" That's how he's thinking. "Who's this white? How come he's not throwing me out?" So it was a little dance, you know, that little dance you have to play sometimes with the young people and yourself and the adults, because a lot of adults don't know the dance. They talk at kids rather than with them. So at the end of the 4 hours, the 49 students created a great vision, but the student that was the clown, the one that he wanted me to throw out, the most at risk, I'm going to read what he wrote, his vision. May I?
Absolutely.
And he calls it a Declaration of Independence, if I may put on my reading glasses. When in the course of high school events, lots of changes go forth in our lives, we must follow our dreams. Look for the unique goals in our lives to explore the souls of our students, to give them a bright future. We want a peace of mind, a type of unity in our family. We must learn to have better communication among each other. Let success be our number one priority. Let education take us further in life. Try to be all we can be and find happiness in all that we may do. Let us have a form of dependability, work together, and find motivation to push forward. Give each other mutual respect, which will give us faith and self-esteem in one another. And finally, the last paragraph, learning to understand one another, our achievements, our knowledge, our spirit. Let us all make a sacrifice and hope that we can trust and believe in one another. Each and every person is likable and unique. And through our lives, we've had joyous times and times of pain. Let knowledge be power. Like the students of Paul Robeson High School say, quote, "A powerful source of leadership will rise among us," unquote, "and the spirit of our school will never vanish from our lives, but will grow for years to come." Keith Jones, problem student. Does that sound like a problem student to you? No.
No.
So we have untapped potential. You and Linda and Lavelle and everyone on the show knows this. That's being hidden. And sit down, be quiet, get your tests, rather than working with the whole person. And Bill has been working on this. I've been working at you, everyone here on this show. So it's time now to let our voices of our future come forward, as well as the future of all of us, to speak the truth and allow us to have our creative ways to help make a better world together, as Linda said and you said, in one accord. So I just wanted to share that. That's sometimes very frustrating to see when I'm in these schools, what they're doing with these young people in general, and there's always exceptions, that sit down, be quiet is not what they're about. Are they, Lamel?
No, I think, thank you for reading that, Gary, and for sharing that young brother's perspective and giving him voice. But Linda, touched on something at the top of the show that really goes to the heart of why I'm able to sit here tonight, and the heart of, I think, the work that we all do with young people. And it's frankly the power of choice. I submit that, as a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s on the south side of Chicago, I had lots of choices. Most of them were not good. I chose to go this way rather than that way. And I submit to you, if we give young people more choices and more options, they will choose to go another way. But if you're in an environment and in a setting, be it school, neighborhood, home, where the choices are limited and the options are few, then those are the options and the choices that they're going to choose, and they tend to be rather negative. I submit to you that most of the brothers around my house tonight who may be on corners, who may have chosen alternative lifestyles and means to live those lifestyles, if I were to present them an option, a choice that did not involve putting their life on the line, that did involve an honest wage, a real job for them to provide for their families and their loved ones, that did not involve a pathway to jail or prison, I submit to you, they would make that choice. You gave that young man an option and a choice to sit there with his head down, feeling bad about himself and his circumstances, or be empowered about who he is and his pathway forward and his future. And think about it. For a young man who's been told that he's nothing but everything but less than, to be even asked to put a vision and a purpose and a mission for your life on a board and or be able to articulate that and communicate, how empowering is that, right? And so, you know, we have much work to do, because the young people that you work with and the young people that we deal with in the most problem areas of our nation and world have to be told that they're valued, have to be told that they have more choices than meet the eye that their present circumstances may envision and allow, and they have to be empowered. And we see, I'm evidence that when you empower young people, when you give young people a voice, when you teach them very basic principles around putting forth a mission, vision, and purpose for their lives, that the outcomes are different than when we don't lay those options on the table.
Right.
Lamel, and then we'll let, of course, other people talk too. But Lamel, I'm very excited about the opportunity working with you with this inner city Woodlawn, because I've done that all my life in the inner cities, Englewood and other areas, Boston, etc. And I see the idea of 2 or 3 are gathered. You understand very well what I'm saying. So could you say something about what has motivated you to create Greenlining Realty USA and start in your childhood neighborhood?
Yeah, in 2016, although I've been on other paths, if you will, with my work in and around DC and government relations, and even starting a sports agency and being around sports, at the heart of, I guess, if there was an underlying theme of my life, no matter what I've done, it's been one of advocacy, right? From, again, starting with the work we did of starting an organization of high school students in Chicago who weren't allowed to vote and fighting for the right to vote, leading a citywide walkout and working with you, right? To everything I'm doing, at the heart of it has been advocacy. So in 2016, Gary, I went home on a trip home, and I went, you know, my family home where I grew up is still in my family for over 70 years. And I stood on the porch and I looked and I saw the same vacant lot that's been there since I was a child. I looked over in another direction. I saw the same blighted properties. And I just said, hey, I define an entrepreneur, everyone, as someone who goes on top of a building, jumps off, and tries to figure out what's going to happen on the way down. I had no background in real estate development. You know, all I knew is that my neighborhood, in many respects, was in the same condition that it was as a child. And I had to offer something to be able to give back. And so I launched Greenlining Realty USA, which is an direct, you know, opposite to why I believe my neighborhood and many neighborhoods like it are in the condition that they're in, going right at the heart of the historic practice of redlining, which is discriminatory, which instead of opening doors, closed doors. It drew red lines around my neighborhood and communities like it to disinvest. And I wanted to message that through real estate development, I could engage in neighborhood transformation. Everyone on this show tonight, we all know that building new buildings on vacant lots and you know, rehabbing blighted properties does not alone transform neighborhoods. This is a means to an end. If I don't touch the grammar school and the education infrastructure down the street, if I don't touch and affect the mental health needs in my neighborhood, if I don't touch the job, access to jobs in my neighborhood, if I don't figure out a way to instill technology training and partner with other community organizations, then I'm really not serious about true neighborhood transformation. So we are not at Greenlining flipping properties just to sell them. We're on the ground with a very concentrated focus on the West Woodlawn neighborhood to demonstrate that we can transform without displacement, in partnership with the neighborhoods, and bringing community and making my neighborhood livable, walkable, and playable again.
I like what you're saying, Lamel, about a comprehensive approach. That's what I'm going to be sending you, by the way. A comprehensive approach that includes mentoring, includes students doing action breakthrough projects in the community with adults, all kinds of ideas, bringing the business, and et cetera. So we need a comprehensive, integrated, sustainable approach to keep this thing growing, as you said. And I've committed many of my years to this and feel like, working uphill a lot of times without the funding, without a lot of people working with it. But I feel now with you behind this and other people now open to this more and more, and seeing the need for alleviating that ignorance and hopelessness that goes with all that, this is a new time, I say in God's time. That's me talking, okay?
Yeah.
I feel the divine timing for everything, and everything works towards the good, whether we see it or not with the ego. But you and I and the people on this show, I'm sure, understand everything works towards the good, and everything's a blessing, but it doesn't always look that way initially, does it, Lamel?
No, and look, I'm just a vehicle, right? I'm just a vessel. I should not be an anomaly. I should not be celebrated for anything. I'm doing what we're called to do, and that's shine a light. And we shine a light, and I'm proclaiming that my neighborhood is worthy of the same housing stock as the North Side, as the suburbs, that my neighborhood is worthy as the same investment that is being made in other parts of the city. I'm shouting from the mountaintop and proclaiming and shining light that when you put investment, that my neighborhood has the same bones, the same structure. If I were to be on Division or Milwaukee, Cottage Grove is just as worthy, and King Drive Avenue is just as worthy of investment as well. I'm just as close, if not closer, to downtown than most. I'm just as close to the lake and to transportation. The Green Line runs from my neighborhood all the way to the North Side. And so when we shine a light on places that otherwise would not, and when we proclaim and fight for people that otherwise would not have been had a voice, then we're able to make real change. And that's really all I'm doing. I'm shining a light on my neighborhood and proclaiming that it's worthy, and proclaiming that if I catalyze and create catalytic moments for new businesses to come in, for new housing stock to come in, then I will be able to catalyze other areas in the South Side, not the reverse. The historic thinking has been that if we start east towards the lake, that things would trickle. No, I'm proclaiming that, no, let's start in my neighborhood on the west side of Woodlawn, and let's work our way over to the lake and rebuild that way. And so all I'm doing is giving an example to my friends and other folks like me who lived and emerged from environments that I have, that if we drop a pebble and if we go back, and it doesn't have to be as comprehensively as I'm doing, but you take a rehab, you start with your own childhood home, you take a lot, green space, do something to drop a pebble that gives hope and gives life, and you'll be amazed at the domino effect and the change that we can enact if more folks did this.
It's beautiful. Yes, that's a big undertaking, but it's so important what you're doing. And what you said about a light, that's, I'm really professing that we already imagine it already done. It's already created.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And it's just a matter of just being up to speed with that. And I was also, something just came to mind that there was development, an urban change in this one area. And they said that it was because they put benches along a certain path. and that caused people to sit down and congregate and talk, and just little minor things like that in the way that they planned the layout of the, you know, maybe a park in the middle of the area of the residential. Are you looking at those types of creative ways to bring people together and events and?
Yeah, sometimes you hit it right on the head, Linda. Sometimes it's not so much about a new building and a new structure as it is of planting a tree, as it is of cleaning and converting a lot that was once vacant and strewn with glass and debris and making it a garden. Sometimes it's just creating more green space. So it is a hybrid and approach. It's not it is new shiny objects, but is also growing and green and creating space for people to play. Again, the goal is to make the neighborhood walkable, livable, and playable. And look, you know, we know, those of us who are people of faith, that we define faith as the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Just 4 years ago, I was on the porch of my childhood home, imagining and envisioning new homes being constructed, constructing workers on the blocks that have not been there for decades. We've not seen this kind of comprehensive bulldozers of new home construction. I was imagining that we could take blighted properties, and if you go on our website, Greenlining Realty USA, or even on my Instagram, which is Lamel MC, if you go on and look at a rehab project and how we transform this blighted property, you would think, if you were on the inside and look at that property today, you would not believe it was not only on the south side of Chicago in West Woodlawn. You would think that it was probably on the north side or in some fancy area in the suburbs. I believe that you have to start with a vision, and you have to proclaim that what you seek. You have to manifest that destiny. And it all starts with what you have in your heart and what you can imagine in your mind. And frankly, the work and figuring out. Now, I don't want to oversimplify. The Bible also teaches us that faith without work is dead. In 4 years, it's taken a lot of work, a lot of resources, bugging a lot of people, trying to raise a lot of money. And that work is happening just moments before I even, and continuing moments before I even jumped on this show tonight. So there's no substitute for hard work. We operate as people of faith, but it is in tandem with hard work. And yes, I am very blessed to be able to do what what we're doing, and to demonstrate word and deed matching thus far, along with the vision. But that is also coupled with a tremendous amount of work and a lot of folks on the team besides myself, and partnering and collaboration with community and organizations in my neighborhood to get this done.
Right. Well, I just want to add one thing. Eckhart Tolle. Are you familiar with Eckhart Tolle?
No.
So he's a visionary, and he talks about the power of now and about a new earth. And at the end of this chapter, I just turned to this page, and it's exactly what you're saying. It says, enjoyment of what you are doing combined with a goal or vision that you work toward becomes enthusiasm.
Yes.
Even though you have a goal, what you are doing in the present moment needs to remain the focal point of your attention. Otherwise, you will fall out of alignment with universal purpose.
Mm.
Make sure your vision or goal is not an inflated image of yourself and therefore a concealed form of ego, such as wanting to become a movie star, a famous writer, or a wealthy entrepreneur. Also, he says, and I'll go to the next one. Also, he says, make sure you engage, which is part of here. Hold on. Yeah, I don't have the book. I just had something else here. So what he's saying, all this implies is that your goal or vision is then already a reality within you on the level of mind and of feeling. Enthusiasm is the power that transfers the mental blueprint into the physical dimension. That is the creative use of mind. And that is why there is no wanting involved. You cannot manifest what you want. You can only manifest what you already have. You may get what you want through hard work and stress, but that is not the way of the new earth. And it says Jesus gave the key to the creative use of mind and to the conscious manifestation of form when he said, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And that's
Amen.
it. Isn't it great? And that what you
Amen.
are doing, it's not about fame and fortune. It's not about your ego desiring to, puff yourself up or make, like you said in the beginning, and this is not me. This is really a vehicle of God's will be done. And you are the change that people want to see in the world. That's why you are inspiring, and that's why this is going to happen, because it already
Well,
Very
I
well
appreciate
said.
it.
Very well said, Linda. Another thought from the Bible scripture. I like all kind of scriptures. I like the Muslims, the Hindus, the American Indian. It doesn't matter. It's all coming from one God. Say something about anybody on this show can, if they want, in Turkish. The faith of a mustard seed. You've heard that, a lot of you in the Bible, I'm sure. The faith of a mustard seed can move mountains, literally. What does that mean to anybody here? Anybody want to share that? The faith of and you shared a lot of it, Lamel, of course. The faith of a mustard seed can move mountains, literally, and grow into the greatest tree of heaven. You may want to say something about that, how it's impacted your life, that kind of faith?
Hi, Gary, it's Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Hi. Let me address that and a couple of other things and ask for Lamel's response, okay?
Yep, good.
What I am doing right now at the tender age of 80 is redefining my life and career. And it's happening in a very exciting way. And as Gary knows, a very key aspect of it is it's all related to education and empowering young people. But my approach is that the education system that we have, right, for all of the good that it tries to do, is structured in such a way that it's disempowering. And it's got a curriculum, it's got a structure, it's got an agenda, etc. And it sees its mission, purpose, and vision as doing the best job inside that box that it can. Well, my vision, mission, and purpose work, which has gone on now for 40 years, has been to get out of that box, to get educators to think about human beings and what I'm calling in my new work, their vital spirit, okay, rather than the curriculum we have to teach, and therefore how we are going to assess it and measure it and thereby label the kids according to how they do on the curriculum. So empowerment is really about stepping out of the curriculum box and stepping into the vital spirit, essence of young people, which means asking totally different questions, organizing things differently, placing priorities in different places, etc. So what you're doing, if you want it to be comprehensive, and you've certainly painted a beautiful picture of that, it's got to penetrate this institution called education in a very, very different kind of way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Bill. And thank you for your service at the tender young age of 80 years old. I say you're 80 going on 30 from what I can tell.
I get that. Thank you.
Your comments though remind me that while we weep and are saddened by the realities of COVID-19 and the toll that it has taken on the lives of people all over the world, frankly. But the disruption that it has caused, the disruption that this overwhelming pandemic has caused, leads us to have to innovate and be creative and to think about systems very differently, from healthcare to how we engage in business, but especially in education. I think that we have an opportunity in this moment. Children will not be able to go to school for the foreseeable future in the same way and the same ways that they've had. The concept of virtual learning, now there's still inequities built into that system as well,
Yes.
because not everyone has the access to technology. Not everyone's curriculum has been presented. You see the inequities, and as I talk to some of my friends whose kids live in certain school districts, that there was little disruption. They were already prepared for this moment, and it's been a seamless flow to other areas where access to technology is quite a challenge, and let alone parents and the equipment needed and the technology needed to sustain and keep up with the curriculum in the school year. But even in the midst of all of that, there is still opportunity to engage in what you're talking about, and that is to innovate, to recreate, to disrupt a system and a way of thinking about how we educate our children that leads more towards empowerment rather than regimen.
I had the opportunity last week to be in an interactive interview thing online. It was a national thing. And one of the people that I was engaging with was saying and agreeing with what you've just said and what I was saying in that event, that this has given us an absolutely shocking opportunity to rethink why in the world are we educating and how are we educating.
Right.
And we began talking about ways that parents could be creating learning environments at home that are not about, quote, the curriculum and aren't technology dependent, but are really stimulating, okay, the thinking processes of kids and the reasoning processes of kids and the adventure of kids by creating little projects for them to do, activities for them to do, et cetera, et cetera. Breaking out of this mold that you've got to learn the curriculum in order to be making progress as a human being.
Right.
Indeed.
Exactly. Bill, you know, this is very good because this is exactly what I'm planning on doing with my group, because the book, as Gary was saying, Jackie and Creativity Go to School,
Yes.
is what I wrote. And it's all about creating. We're coming up with very creative ways for parents and kids to relate within their homes. So, you know, having material, they need this type of excitement and fun and stimulation and creativity to help them. Now that they don't have a tangible building, they need to
That's right.
establish a creative outlet. And my producer and I are working on it now, and it'll hopefully, you know, we'll see hopefully something coming through the pike. But I'd love to talk to you too. I mean, this is the kind of energy we're looking for, right? To get parents to say, hey, you know what? I'm really creative and I haven't used my creativity, my expanded imagination to take things that I would not necessarily take before in my home and create something new, right? It's all about creating something new, which is what we're planning on doing now in our current state of affairs. We have to create something new. We don't have the predictability of our life anymore. This is
Indeed.
creative living we're talking about right now.
Indeed.
Yeah, creative thinking.
I spent this, this is for Lamel, I spent my career trying to, quote, starting to reform and then absolutely transform what public education was all about. And I, in a way, you could say in the last decade or two, I've given up. That it is such an entrenched system that is legally locked in place, okay, as well as culturally and historically and paradigmatically in our heads locked in place. That we've got to be thinking about creating new and different kinds of alternatives, okay? Now, those alternatives, I would love to have them be publicly supported, publicly engaged, et cetera, rather than just another version of private schools. But we've been locked into this paradigm of education. I call it educentrism. Okay, it's a closed system, but we've been locked into it for so long that that's all parents know. It's the school they went to. It's the school their parents went to. Okay, so we're now in it 4 and 5 generations deep, where the definition of education is what that school was like. Well, out of utter frustration, I persuaded a group of colleagues to lend their brightest and best ideas to me, and I put together and edited a book called Bringing Heart and Soul to Education. And I was willing to take the risk, seemed like it, okay, to put into the dialogue of public education the words heart and soul, okay? As soon as you say heart or soul, they think you're talking about a religious advocacy of some kind, and therefore we have to have separation of church and state, and consequently education stays sterile. Okay, and I'm sure you've encountered this in all the different arenas you've been touching in your work.
Well, unfortunately, Bill, there's nothing new under the sun. You know, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, many decades ago, I invite some folks on the line, if they've never heard of Dr. Woodson, to read his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. We've seen a pattern now for so long of inequity and miseducation among people of color, and the disproportionate use of resources for people with means and people without means, regardless of color. We have to figure out in this era going forward, it's not enough to talk about simply diversity or inclusion. Now, in light of the disruptive moment that we find ourselves, the next challenge and the next phase of our movement and struggle is one for equity. And that is a very different word than being equitable. Equity is the next level of our movement across all facets of this society: education, business, healthcare, job and workforce development. It is now a moment and a time, especially in education, to push for equity. You know, there shouldn't be a disproportionate number of resources if we are one and one people for, you know, living in one particular area of a city or a region. A certain amount of dollars, 2 and 3 times more, are spent to educate, and teachers are paid at a certain level versus others. We now have to, you know, level the playing field, if you will, Bill. And I submit to you that leveling that playing field will help lead to some of the disruption and the positive disruption and innovation that you're putting forth tonight.
You know, this is a great conversation on education. I'll chime in a few ideas that come to me. For many years, Lamel, as you know, many years I labored in the vineyards of the Lord in the Chicago public schools.
Yes.
Very political. and largely minority. Okay, it used to be different, but largely minority. I'm a white gentleman here, but in a largely minority-based Chicago public schools.
Yeah.
And I found that the kids, the young people, always were open to me and wanted to work, and we had this great relationship. And they kept saying, "Well, what are you doing? These kids love you." I said, "Well, I love them." But it stopped politically at the higher levels. There's always only certain far I can go before the politically. I wasn't part of that politics. Whether what color it was doesn't matter. I was usually stopped. Okay. But that didn't stop me, because you got to follow your bliss in your heart. So
Sure.
that's why I wrote the book about empowering. It says in the Bible, become like a child. I'm telling you stuff and enter the kingdom of heaven. And here's what it means to me in these times. We're so know-it-all, a lot of us. We think we have it all. We need to control things. But now, when the paradigm shifts, guess what? Everyone goes back to zero.
That's right.
So now we're all going back to zero, and we better keep open to what's really going on and keep helping our brothers and sisters in black and white, whatever it is, and involve our young people, because they have the higher vibration. They're open still. They have that vibration of spirit that Jesus talked about. Become like a child and enter the kingdom within all of us. So I'm very happy to hear, Mamel, that we can do some things with your Woodlawn, with your project, with a youth town meeting, but there's going to be much more to that. The pieces that you talked about will be part of that with your support, of course, with your ideas. But the young people will change things faster than anybody else. A quick story, then I'll let people talk too. It was with 200 Illinois mayors several years ago. I brought 40 kids from Riverside, you know where that is, Lamell, or south of Englewood, Palatine, a whole nother world, in Southern Illinois. 40 kids dressed very nicely, and the mayor said, "Why are these kids here?" I brought them on the stage. This was televised. I said to the young people, "Why are young people pretty smart?" They said, "Yes." Everyone agreed. They didn't know each other. 2, you think adults know how smart you are? They all went, "No," immediately. No. 11-year-old takes the mic, says, "Just because I can't vote doesn't mean I can't think. Just because I can't vote doesn't mean I can't think." You know what that did to the mayors? A mayor gets on the mic, says, "These kids are making it look pretty silly. We better get real." And everybody got real together. The mayors, the kids started talking real. That's what we're going to be doing, working with you, hopefully getting more real with the young people, giving them that voice with the support of the community and the adults, etc., to change this paradigm of all these murders. That's all you hear about it in the news. Well, there's a spirit inside Englewood and Woodlawn, these communities, a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, there's a spirit that needs to be released, and now is the time. And this pandemic, as you said, Lamell, is an opportunity for everyone to go back to zero and open up to a new paradigm, right, Lamell?
Yeah, well, listen, there is no significant movement from Tiananmen Square to Birmingham, Alabama. There's no significant movement for positive change where young people were not at the forefront. And if there ever was a time, from COVID to George Floyd, where young people of all races, of all colors, all over the world are leading, not following, are leading, are shouting, are proclaiming their voice, putting forth change, whether we want to hear it or not. And so, whatever you face with bureaucrats, both Bill and Gary, those days are clearly numbered, because the voices of young people and the voices of those who've not been heard will take their stand, and they have taken a stand. And if we were to do a cursory glance of the last few weeks and some of the very legitimate, forward-thinking, and disruptive policy recommendations across all sectors of our society, those have been put forth by young people, not elected officials, not bureaucrats, not political folks in, education systems and government buildings. The real change will be driven, as it always has, by the people, from the ground up, not top down.
Beautiful, beautiful. Jeanette, you want to say anything? Since you work with young people too? Jeanette?
Yes, I
Hi.
had to unmute myself. I am so blown away by everything that's being said here. I can't begin to tell you how much it's helping me to hear this tonight. Of course, right? As everything happens as it should. Lamel, you're an amazing, amazing inspiration.
Well,
So, I mean it. And so, well, so that you know, I've taken over 300 kids from the inner cities of Chicago to travel with me on what is known as Peace Journey. We get sponsors to come and support that so that we can take them and let them have access to those choices that you spoke about. Because once they are introduced to things like building a garden in Casablanca with other, with Muslim students there, and they come back, they can't look at their world the same way anymore. It's completely transitions and transforms how they view their abilities and themselves in the world. I could tell you so many stories. And obviously what you're doing is so relatable to me. But one of the things that I have a lot of thoughts, and I actually was taking some notes, but it's on this issue of choice and exposure. It changes everything when these kids are exposed.
Yeah.
So I think about the faith of the mustard seed and how it can move mountains. But the mustard seed, unlike we humans, is void of choice. A seed's job is to be a seed and grow. Humans are also a seed. We have the same power to grow and evolve, plus the gift of choice. Choice is what we have to provide young people through exposure to options. Through exposure to choice and choices, children will have more experiences and evolve in different and important ways. So I just wanted to share that.
No, Jeanette, what you share, reminds me of another book and another gentleman whose life and life service I've been blown away by, Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor. He wrote a book entitled The Substance of Things Hoped For. And as I stated earlier, that on one hand is how we have defined faith. But the point that's been made tonight by Gary's work, by what you just stated, Jeanette, by what Bill shared, for young people, and what I gleaned from Dr. Proctor's book, when you realize that you are the substance of things hoped for, when you realize that you are the evidence of things not seen, when I came to understand, who I was, for generations of ancestors who fought and died for me to have the right to go to school, for me to have the right to live, for me to have the right to start a business, for me to dwell in some aspects, in some modicum of freedom, when you realize that that's not just something that we say in church, but that you are the embodiment of that faith. You are the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen for generations of people that never could have imagined the places that we would go and the places that we would be able to dwell. And so that is part of the empowering journey and moment of realization, if you will, that you and I have the opportunity to share with young people. And that is part of the motivation and inspiration. It's not so much always what we impart to them, it's what we empower them to realize about themselves and who they are in this world.
Exactly. So exactly it. I did want to say one more thing. I grew up very poor in a part of Southern Ohio, which I didn't realize growing up, but it was
Yeah.
a very, very segregated community. In fact, over the last 3 weeks, they've had race riots there.
Mhm.
And it's called Bethel, Ohio. And there was just a BuzzFeed article that came out. I mean, when I was growing up there was an African-American student that moved there, and his father was in the military, and they moved in this little town called Bethel to be safe.
Yeah.
And his A burned across in this kid's yard. And of course, this was my first awakening.
Mhm.
So the book that you mentioned, The Miseducation of the Negro,
Mhm.
I wish someone would write The Miseducation of the Whites about Negroes, because there's so much history that we
Mhm.
missed, that we didn't know. And I mean, my father worked within the Black community, so it was never an issue for me. I marched in 1968 in the race riots in Cincinnati. I really never saw color. I only saw people. But
Mhm.
we were fed so much misinformation ourselves about the stresses of what it was like growing up Black here. And I'm so happy that that's changing now.
Yeah, well, the book that you mentioned is being written before our eyes right now.
It
I
is,
think
yes.
folks are coming to a greater awareness around, what it means to have implicit bias. I think folks are coming to a greater awareness around systemic racism and barriers that have been set, not by accident, but actually legal systemic barriers like redlining. Some of my friends, until I started Greenlining, had never even heard of the term redlining and did not even know that a legitimate, legal, discriminatory practice was actually implemented in this country towards people of color. And so the book that you reference is the one that we're living right now. The challenge and thus the opportunity is, is America and is the world reading it? Will we be different from this moment? Will this just be a moment where folks say a lot of good things, but what will happen with action and disruption around these devastating systems that have been perpetuated for centuries?
Yeah.
Linda, we have about 10 minutes. Should we have Lamel do a closing comment, and then you and I can say some things?
Yeah, and then
Time flies when we're having fun, huh?
I know, and
Well,
then
yeah.
we'll talk about the next guest too, as well.
So, Lamel, closing comments. You are an inspiration. Say something. You want to do a closing comment or something about today?
No, look, I hope that everyone realizes that this conversation and this moment is just the beginning. It's not the end. I recognize that our time here tonight is very brief, but the opportunity for our work goes forward from tonight and beyond. And it's been an absolute pleasure to join Linda and Gary. And, there aren't enough words to properly, articulate how important my time with Gary Goldman was as a child. And I didn't even realize it until I got older. And I sit, where I sit today. And I hope that it's instructive that when you pour into young people in a very authentic, loving, and sincere way, and you don't talk down to them, but that you talk to them and empower them, what we can achieve as a society is, and as a world, will be absolutely remarkable. If I can be an example of the goodness of the work of empowering young people, then I'm proud to do that. And I'm proud to share and proclaim from the mountaintop that teaching young people, especially wherever you find them, inner city, suburban, urban, rural, wherever you find them. When you empower young people with basic principles of life around creating a mission, vision, and purpose for their lives, dramatic change for good will occur.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lamel. And then I have some final closing comments, then she'll show the next week's guest. For me,
Gary, I'd love his email address.
Well, we're going to show that.
we're going to show that in a minute.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, Lamel, beautiful. You're a beautiful man, a beautiful
Thanks,
soul.
Gary.
When you did the Redeem the Dream March in 2000 as national coordinator, this reminds me of Redeeming the Dream. Martin
Yes.
Luther King, before he passed on, he said, "I see the promised land," right? Well, for me, what that means is he saw what is possible and what's possible now today. Let us see the promised land together. That we're all one, as Linda said. We're all one family. We're all one with God. Let us go to that promised land with our heart and our souls and one accord. And Mamel, you've been an inspiration today of exemplifying that. Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
Linda, thank
Yes.
you.
And I want to add that too, that, there's no separation here. It's all an illusion. So, we have to realize that who we really are, what our true self is, and it's an awakening. This is the time that we all need as people on this planet to awaken to the fact that this is our choice, to raise our consciousness, to be in the present moment, to be with each other in that place of God-centered connection. And this is another example of when that doesn't happen. This is just another reason why we better wake up and understand who we really are from a deeper, loving perspective. So we're very grateful that you're here to help us also to process what is happening now and to pray for everyone to work together in loving companionship and partnership in this world.
Amen.
So
Thank you.
you're welcome. So I have the privilege of, thank you again, Lamar. For the next guest, his name is Ved Sankar. He said, what am I? I am a problem solver. I know people are seeking ways outside the traditional avenues to improve their physical, mental, and spiritual health. I guide my clients to tap into their highest potential, discover and fulfill their deepest purpose, leading to an ecstatic life. I can help find the deepest integral truth. And so he's had 20 years of training in yoga, physical wellness, emotional intelligence practices, which guides and pursues to understand self, helps groups, small businesses, and such. He has a project called the Eden Project, where he goes into communities and helps them create their victory gardens. So he goes into the inner city, goes into every kind of neighborhood that's in need of providing their own sustainable products and growth of lettuce, whatever they want to grow, he's there to help them. So we're looking forward to that. We want to show the contact page right now. Hold on. I will share that. And everyone can reach out in Facebook land, and there's Lamel on your website, phase2-consulting.com right here, right? Is there any other contact you would like them to know about, Lamel?
No, there's a way to get to me there, and my email may or may not be accessible there, but there is an email address on the contact page of that website. Instagram is direct message. Lamel, LAMELLMC, is another way as well.
Oh, okay, beautiful, great. Gary, did you want to say something about your kidsamerica.com?
Real brief. We just updated the KidsAmerica. It's not net, not .com, so we better change that. It's not
net.
It's
Sorry.
okay.
I'll change
Makes
it.
a difference with a little word, but it's .net. So they didn't have .com available. .net, and it just says a lot of my work in the mail's on there. Actually, with one of the videos briefly with the work we've been doing with the years ago, but it just exemplifies my passion for our young people. I also have a show on Facebook Live 4 days a week called God Chronicles, which is really getting to know the God within you, that power within you, and being able to see the blessings and everything, just like we're doing here today. So I'm very blessed to be here with all you wonderful people, and the people that will be seeing this recorded on Facebook and other areas.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we just have a couple minutes. I guess we'll end with a beautiful prayer. I love to chant the priestly benediction, and I interpreted it in a little different way than what is traditionally, but it's the essence of the blessing is, may you and God be one as blessing. May God be one with you in kindness and in graciousness. May you and God be as one in peace and in love. This is the chanting in Hebrew for that blessing. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisar Adonai panav elecha v'yaseim lecha. Shalom.
If you've never heard an angel, you just heard one.
Yes.
I'm going
Peace
to
and
read
blessings,
the
everyone.
last paragraph about young people, and then that'll say it all as far as I'm concerned. This is by Jane Goodall, National Geographic. You know Jane Goodall. She's worked with gorillas and is a wonderful humanitarian. She says, each of us must do our part no matter where we live, in city or countryside. Children are quick to see the value of individual action. All around the world, when I talk to them, I find them aware and convinced they can make a difference and eager to help. Therein lies our hope. More and more people are opening their hearts to desperation they see around them and springing into action. For this is how we attain our human potential for compassion and for love. Jane Goodall. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Lamel and Linda and everybody here. And
Thank you, everyone.
This will be on Facebook. Linda Hope is a dresser.
Linda
Facebook.
Drescher on Facebook. Yep.
And Gary Goldman on Facebook. You'll see the show recorded, and we'll get a copy to you. Is that right, Linda? To Lamel?
Absolutely. It's coming your way.
Thank you.
All righty. Wonderful blessing for everybody. Have a beautiful week. We'll see you next week on Being
Thank
One.
you. Thank you so much.
Lamel, we're going to give you a quick call just to say thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.